Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie of Pandora Astrology, and with me is.
Hey guys, it's Julia Mikas.
And today we have something really interesting to talk with you about. You may already know that this spring and summer of 2020 is a really powerful eclipse season with three eclipses happening in a row. The third one is happening on July 4th, which is also the United States birthday. So today, Julia and I are going to look at the United States chart, which we've never done before in a video. And we're going to look at the United States Solar Return birthday chart, which has the eclipse in it. So here we go. I've got a bunch of charts to show you. Here's the eclipse itself. This eclipse is happening on July 4th at 9:44 p.m. If you happen to be on the West Coast, this chart is set for Berkeley. And we've decided to call this one "We Are All Patriots" because of the really strong um, um, patriotic themes that are in this chart. And so let's think for a moment to the meaning of eclipses. Eclipses are times when we must look at our shadow. And this particular one is a lunar eclipse. And a lunar eclipse is a time when a lot of emotions get stirred up. It's emotions that make us have to look at our shadow, the stuff behind us, the stuff we don't usually want to look at every day. And so a lot of emotions get stirred up. And when an eclipse happens, you know, large sectors of the populace are all feeling it at once and have a lot of emotion going on. So this is a subjective experience inside each of us, but we will often see results of it simply because so many people are experiencing it at once. And if you have anything in your chart that is near where the eclipse is happening in the sky, then you will feel this very personally. The eclipse is happening, as you can see, at 13 degrees of Capricorn. That's the eclipsed moon. And the sun is opposite to it at 13 degrees of Cancer, because an eclipse is always also an either new or full moon. And a full moon is what it is if it's to be a lunar eclipse. This particular eclipse also includes a strong, strong influence of Vesta, which is right here next to the sun, also at 13 degrees. And then Juno is here in Libra, and Chiron is here in Aries, forming a cardinal grand cross in the sky. And now keep that in mind, because that cardinal grand cross is going to show up again in a very interesting place. So another thing to notice is that this eclipse is on July 4th. If you live on the West Coast or in the Mountain Time Zone or the Central Time Zone, if you live on the East Coast in the Eastern Zone, it actually happens after midnight on July 5th. So we'll be feeling the effects of this eclipse on the day of July 4th, leading up to it, and really for about a week leading up to that. So, Julia, let's talk a little bit about the possible meanings of this eclipse based on the archetypes that are here. We've got Juno, we've got Chiron, we've got Vesta, we've got a sun in Cancer, a moon in Capricorn, and also this is a releasing eclipse, not an initiating one, because the south node is here near the eclipsed moon. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Well, just starting with the axis of Cancer and Capricorn being highlighted, and Cancer being the United States birthday. Cancer is such an interesting sign for thinking of it as being representative of the United States identity, because it's a sign that's very much about the homeland, very much about self-protection, very tribalistic, very United States.
Yeah, about blood, the blood that connects you to your people, and the blood that's in our flag, this image that's right behind us, a lot of blood
Exactly.
was shed to even get this country.
Yeah, and Capricorn is there's some similarities because it's on the same axis of Cancer. Both signs can be very self-protective in a lot of ways, but Capricorn is more who you are when you're out in the working world. It has a lot to do with status. It has a lot to do with professionalism. So those types of themes, especially our very identity as a country, I think, are going to be highlighted.
Yeah, what a good point.
Who are we? Who do we want to become?
Yeah, I would think that the influence of Vesta here might bring a quality of hyperfocus, perhaps a
Mm,
sort of a myopic quality of like, well, I don't know anything about the forest because I'm too busy looking at the trees. So there might be like an excessive focus on that patriotic zeal that is implied by these Cancerian placements. Then we have Chiron, which brings in themes of wounding and healing. So old wounds may come up. And this is the nation's birthday. The nation's chart has 13 degrees of Cancer as its sun placement, same as this chart. And so this Chiron placed in this eclipse chart is likely to bring up some old wounding that is accompanied by anger and perhaps even explosive behavior. And then we have Juno here, and Juno signifies social leadership. It can actually signify a woman in power, like a first lady or a queen or another leader of that kind. Um, and it also has to do with social leadership, like social networking. So I don't know exactly how those themes are going to play out, but I felt like it was important to mention them.
mm,
And Julia, when we first looked at this chart, you pointed out that there were quite a few retrogrades in this chart. There's a pile of them over here on the left. Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, the nodes, of course, that's fairly typical. They travel retrograde by and large. Pallas Athena, too, and even Neptune over here. And I wondered if, oh, and Mercury. So, yeah, it's really a little bit crazy how many retrogrades there are. And I wondered if you had thoughts about that.
sure. Well, if you think about it, planets only move backwards in the sky from our perspective on Earth. It's not actually happening in the solar system.
Mm,
But the idea of retrograde almost means that the planet is going against the entire ordered sort of symphony of the solar system in some
mm.
way. It's kind of like it's backtracking on its path. So it's almost like it's adding a sort of um, discordant
Note
sort of
in the
note.
symphony.
Exactly. If you think about the solar system as a symphony, it's almost kind
Mm.
of like going against the harmony of the symphony in a lot of ways. So having so many retrogrades generally can mean that things don't work so smoothly. That's why Mercury retrograde is considered. You take the themes of Mercury, which are communication, which
Mm.
are sort of technical appliances, and then things don't work as smoothly during those periods, or Venus retrograde, that could affect relationships. So having a lot of things not work as smoothly means that, just on a general world level, there could be lots of blockages, lots of frustrations, lots of kind of misfirings between things. It's not an easy time to start things that are new during a lot of retrogrades, for example.
Yeah, I think
So
there's often a sense of obstacles and frustration and blockages and like, oh, I have to go back and do this thing again. I can't just move forward, and how irritating that can be.
yeah, absolutely.
And something about this eclipse is also reminding me of the first eclipse in this set of three. And here I want to say that eclipses often happen in pairs at 6 month intervals, and that those pairs are generally spaced 2 weeks apart. So you'll have 6 months go by, and then you'll have an eclipse, 2 weeks go by, another eclipse, and then another 6 months, and then another pair. Sometimes it's a single eclipse, and sometimes it's triples. This is a case of triples. So a month before this eclipse, in the beginning of June, June 5th, there was another lunar eclipse, the first of this set of three. And that was just as we were experiencing all that stuff around the protests and the black man who died
Yeah,
by asphyxiation with a police
particular.
officer's knee on his neck, and
Yeah,
how much anger that brought up. And that one, being in Gemini and Sagittarius, had a lot to do with voice. Whereas this one has some similar themes because that Chiron in Aries could bring up some anger, some incendiary qualities, and then Mercury is here, not that far from the Sun, and that might again bring up some of those themes about voice. Whose voice matters,
yeah.
and so I think we should watch out for these sorts of things as we're seeing this eclipse approach. So let me go to the second chart that I have here where I've relocated this eclipse for Washington, D.C. And when you do that, you notice that, boom, it suddenly becomes angular. And by
Wow.
angular, I mean that Chiron is rising, Moon is culminating, square the ascendant-descendant axis, Juno is descending, Sun is at the very bottom of the sky with Vesta, and so suddenly this cardinal cross really pops in Washington there on the East Coast. So just because it happens, in the beginning, the very wee hours of July 5th doesn't mean that we will not feel this. Okay, so now I want to show you guys who are watching this the chart for the US. And this is a chart I chose very deliberately. This chart was created by an astrologer named Ebenezer Sibley, and he put a lot of thought into it, and then it was adjusted by a very famous astrologer, among astrologers anyway, named Dane Rudyard. He adjusted the time of this chart by just a few minutes, and this chart works really well for the
Didn't know
United
that.
States.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, isn't it? I thought I had fun researching that. Um, so um, so this shows you a cardinal grand cross in the USA chart. We have the sun in Cancer there, but next to it we have Mercury in Cancer, and that opposes Pluto. And you may have heard that the United States Pluto is in the process of returning to its natal position, something that only happens about every 245 years, and we'll make videos about that. We haven't gotten around to it yet. Um, and then we also have Chiron in Aries. So we are actually approaching a Chiron return for the United States. And a Chiron return for the United States has traditionally, historically been a time of great scandal. I have an essay about that I may put out at some point. And then we have Juno in Libra, opposed Chiron. So what the heck, people? We are seeing another cardinal grand cross featuring Mercury in Cancer, Juno in Libra, Chiron in Aries. And that lunar eclipse, remember, it has got Mercury in Cancer, Juno in Libra, Chiron in Aries, and the moon in Capricorn, not that far from Pluto, about to return in Capricorn. So this one is personal for the US. And I think it's really important to be cautious around it. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Where do I want to go now? So now I want to show you the transit chart. This is basically putting the United States chart in the middle. And there you can see that cardinal grand cross. I've marked these things in red now. And then I've put the chart for the US's own solar return here around the outside. So this is, and that's what this is. This is the solar return chart of the US, and then I've placed it around the US chart as a transit chart. So this is where you can really see how this eclipse, moon in 9 of Capricorn, so that the United States' solar return birthday happens really just a few hours before the eclipse, and it completely captures that eclipse energy. And what a solar return does is it sort of pins the moment so that you sort of feel like that moment gets stretched out all year. And this moment, to be frank, is a little bit scary in the way that it connects with so much in the US chart, and in the way that it has these intense themes. So let's see, is there anything else I want to add about this? Julia, you want to throw anything out there?
I guess I'm also kind of intrigued by that North Node in the US solar return chart in our collective seventh house.
Yeah.
I find that a little bit interesting because, I mean, I don't know, what are your thoughts? I think of a country's seventh house as having to do with our international relations with other countries.
Yeah, our
Just how in a
international
composite
partners,
chart,
right?
The seventh house of a composite chart would be like how the couple relates to other people, or what other types of people get
Mm-hmm.
attracted. And we got
Yeah.
Mars in the seventh house, so we're quite militaristic
And
in how
combative,
we relate to
yes.
others.
Yes.
So I find that North Node in there, in the sign of Gemini, kind of intriguing. Like, is this also going to bring a sort of international element into this?
It's funny when you mentioned that Mars in the seventh house in the USA chart. I
Hmm.
thought, like, yeah, there's Mars in the seventh house of partnership. It's kind of like the USA says to all the other countries, let's be partners. I'm going to bring my military along. We're going to
Yeah,
make your country a democracy, whether you wanted it or not, because we
right.
believe in democracy. This country is so young in some ways, right?
Yeah, very much so.
Ah, okay. So I want to read this paragraph that I wrote to kind of bring some closure to this video, which has already gone on longer than I hoped that it would. And so I'm just going to kind of summarize here a little bit. Here's the takeaway. The night of this year's 4th of July, after midnight for East Coasters, or in the hours before midnight for the rest of the country, features an emotionally intense lunar eclipse, which forms powerful connections to the USA's chart itself and impacts it for the rest of the year until the next USA birthday, basically till July of 2021, by getting locked in via the USA's solar return chart. This eclipse solar return will make not only ourselves, but also our nation look at its shadow. And we will have to examine, what is patriotism? What does this country, our home, Sun in Cancer, right, mean to us? We are a melting pot of people with genes that come from all over the earth. How do we make a home here together with minimum emotional drama and maximum awareness, letting go of the shadows of our nation's past? And that's a mouthful. So I hope you enjoyed this video and got some good stuff out of it. I hope you stay safe on July 4th. I would definitely avoid large crowds where bad stuff might happen. And I will be celebrating the birth of our wonderful nation somewhere very safe. And I hope that you are too. And until next time, we'll see you around the cosmos like we do.